What's up, everybody? It's Joe here with Joseph Blake Photography, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about what to expect from Canon on their roadmap in 2024. We're going to be getting an R5 Mark II, we're going to get an R1, we're going to get an R7 Mark II. Let's talk about what those are going to look like. Before we jump into the video, real quick plug for the channel. I'd really appreciate it if you went and hit the subscribe button. If you hit like, if this is the kind of video that you're interested in, it'll tell the algorithm that I'm doing a good job. Also, if you are one of the folks who really pushed my channel over the top over the last month or so, thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. I was able to remonetize my channel, and I am now able to make 6 cents every time I make one of these. It's awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, let's go ahead and just jump into it. Credit where credit's due. This information is coming both from Canon Watch and Canon Rumors. I don't know if either of them is stealing the information from the other, as well as some folks on Twitter. Again, I don't know who's stealing from who, but the information that we have is a bit of a change from the video that I made a few weeks back where we were talking about the release of the R1, the expectation for the R5 Mark II, and there's some new information both on the R7 Mark II as well as some new lenses that we might be seeing within the next year, probably within the first half of this next year. And before we get into those real specific items, I do just want to make a mention, kind of a somber note, that the 6D Mark II was officially discontinued. I love that camera. That was my first full frame camera. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the R1. And if you remember from my previous video and the video before that, I've been talking about this for a while. The R1 is going to be coming with a 30 megapixel sensor. It's going to be coming with a stacked style sensor that is something new from Canon. Maybe more information on that towards the end of the video. Blazing mega super fast, high bit rate photos. It's not going to be a mega video killer machine. This is going to be a stills shooter for sports, for action, and for studio work. But I think out in the field, wildlife, the Olympics, when you think of stuff like that, Getty, news, photojournalism, that's what this camera is going to be. It's going to be medium resolution. It's going to be super fast. Originally, we had thought that this was going to be announced probably towards maybe the springtime, and then in the hands of folks at the Olympics, and then released officially Q3, Q4. And that was going to be it for the R1. Obviously, they're going to seed this camera into the hands of photojournalists and sports photographers for the Olympics. They did the exact same thing for the R3. It made a lot of sense. It worked really well. We heard a lot about that camera as little leaks were coming out, and it really kind of made things feel like, okay, this thing is coming and it's going to be great. And honestly, I think the R3 was a phenomenal camera for Canon. So now you look at the R1, this is the step up from the R1. We might be getting an R3 Mark II at some point this year. Somewhere a bubble will tell you to look at that video from me. And the R1 will need to be announced before that happens, at least as a developer announcement. Maybe not, it's not going to be announced for general availability, but they're going to announce and say, hey, this is what we're working on. And they're going to slowly but surely trickle out the information about the camera. That's great. It builds up the hype. It's fantastic. That's also mentioned in this rumor. We've been hearing little bits about the R5 Mark II, that it'll be an iteration of the existing R5, very similar to how the R6 Mark II, which I'm shooting on right now, is an iteration of the R6, which I have back in the closet there. It's an iterative improvement. Lots of little things got tweaked and fixed with this camera. As a shooter of the R6, I was very excited to see the changes that they made to this camera. It's a phenomenal adjustment. I think we'll expect the same thing out of the R5, and we're going to see it in a Mark II flavor. No information on pricing, obviously, but I am seeing huge discounts on the R5 right now. The ability to buy this thing under $3,000, closer to $2,500, which is the MSRP for this camera, is pretty crazy. If you're looking for something that shoots RAW and 8K and all that, maybe pick it up before the next one comes out, and it's going to be $38.99 or $39.99, which will probably be about where it shows up. I would expect them to keep those prices around the same. So R1 development announcement, R5 announcement, like full on announcement. And then we're hearing about an R7 Mark II. So that would kind of push the entire line. You had an R5 an R7, the R3, we already have the R6, and in Mark IIs, in second versions, and then we have the R1. And what we keep hearing about with the R1 is this stacked style sensor. The R7 or the 7 line, right, the 7D, has traditionally inherited the sensor or a lot of the features from the top line. The 1D and the 7D were always very well connected, as was the R7 and the R3 1DX Mark III. Those cameras are well linked. They kind of have a symbiotic relationship. The R7 is normally where you see top of the line technology from Canon that you see in its flagship cameras at the APS-C level, at the APS-C price point. In that $1,500 to $2,000 mark. It competes with the 6 series, basically saying, hey, do you want full frame or do you want all the features? So with an R7 Mark II, if we're seeing this stacked style sensor with the R1, I would not be surprised if this year we see a similar sensor, maybe 24 to 30 megapixels, same concept, but in an APS-C size. Obviously, no one has specifics on this, but again, this is kind of tea leaf reading here. As someone who has kind of watched the Canon market for 20 plus years and worked on the buying side of retail, and I've been doing photography for a very long time, I feel pretty comfortable to say that Canon's going to make this kind of a market move. This makes perfect sense to have the R7 Mark II, have almost a completely refreshed line going into 2025 with all their flagships covered, and then start to trickle down that technology into their lower end APS-C models and the less expensive stuff that they're putting out on the market. So it would be great to actually get these cameras announced, at CP Plus this month. We haven't heard anything from Canon leading up to it, so I don't really know what they're going to be talking about. But if we don't hear it at this time, kind of in this next couple of week period, I would say that by May, all this information should be out. So definitely in the next, say 2 to 3 months at the absolute latest, we'll be getting this information about the development announcement of the R1 and the R5 Mark II. The R7 Mark II, obviously super up in the air. The R3 Mark II, I don't know. But I would not be surprised if by the end of this year, not only do we have the announcements of all of these cameras, but we have them. Maybe the R7 and R3 don't land until late this year, early next year, but we'll definitely know when they're coming and what's going on. The other fun bit of news that we got was about lenses and the fact that we're probably going to be getting 3 lenses announced around the same time frame. Number 1 is a 35mm 1.2L with an RF mount, a 28mm that we're not sure is going to be an L or not, and maybe a 1.4, maybe a 1.8. And an update to the RF 70-200 f2.8 that will include the new internal power zoom feature that we have in the 24-105Z. Now, last but not least, I did a video a little while back on some new... Now, if you made it this far in the video, you might remember a video that I did a while back talking about patent applications that Canon had put forth regarding sensors and the speed of sensors. They've been doing a lot on this, and one thing that it's kind of come out that they've done recently is a sensor patent about a 3-layered stack sensor. So normally sensors are stacked, or rather sensor layers have 2 layers, and them being stacked also means that they have the memory on them, there's a buffer, there's a lot of components in them. But to make a sensor faster, or a camera in general faster, you want to try to get as much of the work done throughout the pipeline as early as possible before it ends up kind of down the way, kind of down the road in the buffer and into the various SoCs and kind of chips that are involved in processing the data that comes off the sensor. So there's this patent that talks about the fact that this sensor is going to be 3 layers, which means that not only will it have the photodiode layer, right, which is where the information is obtained from the photodiodes. So you have the photodiode layer, and then you have the layer that actually converts that information, kind of indexes that information. And then you have an additional layer that's been described here. And of course, they're not going to get into super specifics in these patents because they don't want to give away exactly what they're doing. But the idea would be that you could do a lot of processing, potentially, a lot of, kind of management of that signal on the sensor in the layers of, just right there behind everything else. And you would manufacture it all together. Because manufacturing things like this with this kind of precision can be complicated and difficult. Also definitely raises the potential for errors, where the fabrication creates a component of the chip that doesn't do what it's supposed to, and then the whole thing dies. And the bigger and more complex you create a processor, a chip of any kind, the more likely that is to happen, especially in the beginning when you first start rolling out your process. So hopefully this patent means that they're working on some of this technology. I have no idea if that means that any of this technology is going to make its way into the cameras that we're talking about today. Maybe a little early to say, but that would be super cool. I'm really kind of curious to see what Canon means when they say stacked style sensor, but we'll see. But anyway, it's super exciting to hear this information, to get this stuff out. And it looks like the next couple of months is going to be really, really exciting on the Canon side of things. So if you're a Canon user or someone who is watching the industry closely, this should be very interesting to watch. I'm excited. Well, that does it for the information in this video. If you've been entertained, or if this information is pertinent to you, I'd really appreciate it if you go ahead and hit the subscribe button, go ahead and hit the like button. It doesn't really pay many bills other than some of these bills, but it definitely helps for me to make it make sense for me to continue with this channel and with this hobby in making videos for you and bringing 2 cameras with me out into the wild. Anyway, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.